I opened my mailbox expecting junk flyers and bills. Instead, I pulled out a bright red envelope stamped with final notice. My name was printed in bold like I was some kind of criminal. I tore it open right there at the curb. Violation, non-compliant structure. Barn door must remain sealed. Fine, $500 per day. I actually laughed.
Sealed. I muttered. It's a barn door.
I read it again. Then I saw the line about daily fines. $500 per day starting immediately.
My stomach dropped.
Are you kidding me? I said out loud to no one. I looked up at my barn at the end of the driveway. Same barn that had been there since before half this neighborhood even existed. Same barn I restored with my own hands.
I flipped the page over.
Failure to comply will result in escalating penalties and legal enforcement.
Legal enforcement? I said. For a door.
I walked inside, tossed the envelope on my kitchen table, and stared at it like it might explain itself. They can't be serious, I told myself. But deep down, I knew Denise Harper was serious. I drove to the HOA meeting that night with the letter folded in my back pocket.
The clubhouse lights were bright. The room was full.
Word travels fast when someone gets a red notice. Denise sat at the front table like she owned the place.
Perfect blazer. Perfect smile. Perfect control.
When it was my turn to speak, I didn't sit down. I received this today, I said, holding up the letter. $500 a day because my barn door faces the community. Denise didn't blink. You knew the rules when you moved here, she said calmly. I built that barn before this HOA even updated its guidelines, I replied. It's been there for years.
She folded her hands.
Then you should have asked permission. For a structure that predates the rule?
I asked. Yes, she said.
All exterior-facing structures must comply with current standards. That's not what the covenants say, I shot back. Mark Benson leaned into his microphone. The architectural committee determined your door disrupts neighborhood harmony.
Harmony. I said. It's wood.
It opens and closes.
It opens toward the street, Mark said.
That's the issue. Linda Cho sat beside him, flipping through papers.
She wouldn't look at me. I looked straight at Denise. Why now?
That barn has been there longer than some of these houses.
She smiled.
We're conducting a compliance review of the entire neighborhood. So I'm first.
I asked. You're non-compliant, she replied.
A few neighbors shifted in their seats. I said, you're fining me $500 per day. That's not a warning.
That's punishment. It's enforcement, Denise said. Over a door? Over rules, she said.
I felt heat rise in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Show me where it says I can't have a barn door. Mark pushed a packet toward me.
Section 8. 4. Visual uniformity. I skimmed it.
This was revised 3 years ago.
Yes, Denise said.
My barn is older than that revision. All homeowners must comply with current standards, she repeated. So what's the solution?
I asked.
Seal the door permanently, she said. Or replace it with an approved design. You want me to remove a functioning barn door and board it up?
Yes.
And if I don't? The fines continue. I stared at her. You're serious?
Completely, she said.
I looked at the room. Does anyone else think this is extreme?
Silence.
Carl from down the street cleared his throat but didn't speak. I leaned closer to the table. You're telling me I owe $500 starting today?
Correct, Denise said.
For something that's been standing for decades?
Yes.
I let out a slow breath. This feels personal. Denise tilted her head. It's policy.
Mark nodded.
No one is above the rules. I said quietly, I'm not trying to be above anything. I'm asking for common sense. Linda finally spoke, softly. Maybe we could issue a grace period? Denise didn't look at her. The notice stands. Linda went quiet again. I felt it then. Not just irritation. Something sharper. You're making a mistake, I said. Denise's smile tightened. Are you threatening the board? I'm telling you this doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, she said. Seal the door, and this goes away. I slid the letter back into my pocket. I'm not sealing it. Then the fines will continue, she replied. Over a door, I said again. Over compliance, she corrected. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Outside, the air felt heavy. I could hear voices inside the clubhouse as the meeting moved on like I didn't matter. I drove home slowly. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't go inside right away. I walked straight to the barn. I ran my hand over the wood.
They want you sealed, I said quietly.
The hinges creaked when I opened it. Same sound they'd made for years.
Non-compliant, I muttered.
I stepped back and looked at how it sat on the property line. Most people didn't notice that detail.
But I did. I always had.
This land wasn't always part of their neat little subdivision. My parcel had history before their covenants, before their clubhouse, before Denise ever picked up a gavel.
Why now? I asked myself. Why me?
Was it because I didn't show up to every meeting? Because I didn't repaint my mailbox to match their approved shade of beige? Or did she just need an example? I walked back inside and pulled out my filing cabinet. If they want to talk rules, I said, we'll talk rules. I found my original deed, still in its protective sleeve. I laid it on the table next to the red violation notice.
Let's see what you missed, I whispered. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused.
And that was worse for them. By the end of the week, the fines hit $3,500. I spread the notices across my kitchen table.
Each one stamped in red.
Each one colder than the last.
500 per day, I muttered.
They're not bluffing. On Friday afternoon, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it. I opened it slowly. Notice of intent to place lien.
I felt my jaw tighten. A lien? Over a barn door?
I grabbed my phone and called Denise. She answered on the third ring.
This is Denise. This is harassment, I said.
It's enforcement, she snapped immediately. Seal the barn door. You fined me $3,500 in 7 days. You chose non-compliance. You're threatening a lien on my house.
You were warned.
For something that predates your rule change, I said. All homeowners must comply with current standards, she replied. Show me where it says you can override existing structures.
You're not a lawyer, she said sharply. And you're not a dictator, I shot back. Her voice dropped. Careful. Or what? I asked.
Or we escalate. You already are.
Seal the door. No, I said. There was a long pause.
Then expect further action, she said, and hung up. I stared at my phone. Further action, I repeated. 2 days later, I found out what that meant. I was in the garage when I saw flashing lights reflect off the wall.
I stepped outside.
A patrol car was parked in my driveway.
You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. An officer stepped out. Calm. Professional. Sir, he called.
Yeah, I said, walking toward him. I'm Officer Daniel Ruiz. We received a complaint about unsafe construction on your property.
Unsafe construction? I asked.
It's a 40-year-old barn. He glanced past me at the structure. Ma'am from the HOA says you're violating community safety codes.
Of course she does, I said.
I need to take a look, he said.
Be my guest. We walked to the barn.
I opened the door fully. You see any active construction?
I asked. He shook his head. No, sir.
I went inside and grabbed a folder from a shelf. I pulled permits when I reinforced the beams 5 years ago, I said. County inspected it.
He flipped through the paperwork.
Everything looks stamped and approved, he said.
I know.
He handed the papers back.
Looks legal to me.
So that's it?
I asked.
As far as I'm concerned, he said. This is a civil matter. I glanced toward the street. A few neighbors stood outside pretending not to watch. Am I being cited?
I asked. No, he said.
Just responding to a complaint. From Denise Harper?
I asked.
I'm not at liberty to discuss who filed it, he said carefully.
I nodded.
Understood. He lowered his voice slightly. Between you and me, this doesn't look like a safety issue.
It isn't. He gave a small shrug.
If it's HOA related, you may want legal advice. I'm considering it. He tipped his hat slightly. Have a good afternoon. You too, officer. As he drove off, I felt heat in my face.
Not anger. Something worse. Embarrassment.
Carl walked over from across the street. Everything okay? He asked quietly. Apparently my barn is a public threat, I said.
He gave a tight smile.
They called the police on you?
Yeah. He shook his head.
They've been looking for a reason to make an example of someone.
Why me? I asked.
You don't attend every meeting, he said. You don't ask for approval on every tiny thing. So that makes me a target?
It makes you independent, he said.
Since when is that illegal? In this neighborhood, he said softly. Since Denise took over. I crossed my arms. Does anyone else think this is ridiculous?
Some do, he said.
Some are scared to say it. Scared of what?
Fines. Letters. Liens.
I looked back at my barn. All this over a door. It's not about the door, Carl said. Then what is it about?
Control, he said.
He walked back across the street, leaving that word hanging in the air.
Control.
I went inside and called Denise again. She answered briskly.
Yes.
You sent the police to my house. I reported a safety concern. There is no safety concern. That's not what our review indicated. Your review isn't law enforcement. You are out of compliance. That doesn't justify a patrol car in my driveway. If you complied, none of this would be necessary. You're escalating this on purpose. You're resisting on purpose, she replied.
Why me? I asked.
You are the only homeowner refusing correction. That's not true. It is currently true. You could have issued a warning.
I did.
$500 per day is not a warning. It's motivation. I went quiet for a second. Are you trying to push me out?
I asked.
That's absurd, she said. Then why does this feel personal? Feelings are irrelevant, she said. Rules are not. You're making a mistake, I said. You're making one, she shot back. Seal the door. No. Then expect consequences. She hung up again. I stood there holding the phone. Why me? That question kept circling in my head. That night, I pulled my deed back out. If this is about control, I said to myself, then I need to understand exactly what I control. I spread the survey map flat under the kitchen light. My parcel was outlined in thick ink. The subdivision wrapped around it like it had grown later. There was a narrow strip marked along the rear boundary. I leaned closer. Utility easement, I read aloud. Exclusive access for maintenance and service. What does that mean? I asked quietly. The line ran directly behind my barn. I traced it with my finger. If they're escalating, I said slowly, then I need to know everything. I didn't fully understand the easement yet. But I circled it in red. And for the first time since this started, I felt something shift. This wasn't irritation anymore. This was suspicion. And suspicion meant I needed answers. I pulled into my driveway just before sunset, and I saw it immediately. A thick metal chain wrapped tight around my barn doors. A heavy padlock hung in the center like a statement. I stepped out of my truck slowly. You've got to be kidding me, I whispered. I walked up to it and grabbed the chain. It rattled hard against the wood. They touched my property, I said under my breath. There was a laminated notice zip-tied to the chain. HOA compliance action. Structure secured pending correction. Secured. I snapped. By who? My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. That part surprised me. I pulled out my phone and called Denise. She answered like she'd been waiting. Yes. You can't lock my property, I said. It's community-facing, she replied calmly. Until you comply, it stays secured. You chained my barn. It was necessary. That's illegal. Prove it. You stepped onto my land without permission. It's within HOA enforcement authority. No, it's not. You're out of compliance. That doesn't give you the right to trespass. She let out a slow breath. The structure impacts the visual integrity of the neighborhood. It's a barn door, I said. It's non-approved. You don't get to physically interfere with my property. You left us no choice. I left you no choice? I repeated. You could have waited for mediation. You refused correction. So you sent someone with a chain? Yes. Who authorized that? I did. I felt my jaw tighten. You're admitting that. I stand by the decision. You realize this crosses a line. You crossed it first. How? By ignoring a lawful directive. Lawful.
I said.
Show me the law that says you can lock my door.
It's in the covenants. No, it's not. Then sue us, she said flatly. There it was. Careful what you wish for, I said quietly. She laughed once.
Seal the door, and the chain comes off.
No. Then it stays. She hung up.
I stood there staring at the lock. Isn't this trespassing? Isn't this vandalism? Or did they really think they could do whatever they wanted? I tried the chain again, just to feel the resistance.
Solid. Intentional.
They wanted me humiliated. I stepped back and looked toward the street. A curtain moved in Carl's front window.
Unbelievable, I muttered.
I went inside and called my sister Rachel. She picked up on the first ring.
Hey. You okay? They chained my barn door, I said. What?
They physically locked it.
Who? The HOA. Denise.
Tell me you're joking. I'm standing in front of it.
There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. That's not a fine.
That's interference. That's what I said. Did you get it on video? I'm about to.
Good, she said.
Document everything. I'm so tired of this.
I know, she replied.
But don't react emotionally.
I'm not. Good. Fight it. But be smart. I will. They want you to blow up, she said.
Don't give them that.
I won't.
You still have the original deed?
Yes.
Read it again. I already have.
Read it slower, she said. I leaned against the kitchen counter.
You think there's something in there? I think you've owned that land longer than their rulebook has.
She wasn't wrong.
What if I cut the chain?
I asked. Don't, she said immediately.
Let them own this mistake.
Mistake.
If they trespassed, you don't want to muddy it. I let out a breath.
You're right.
Call a lawyer. I'm considering it.
Consider faster, she said. I managed a small laugh.
You always were the pushy one.
And you always wait too long, she replied. Not this time. Good, she said.
You're not crazy for being angry. I'm not angry, I said. What are you?
Focused.
That's better. After we hung up, I went back outside with my phone and recorded everything. This is my property, I said into the camera. HOA installed chain and lock.
No court order. No notice beyond fines.
I walked the length of the barn, filming the hinges, the posts, the ground. They stepped here, I said quietly. They crossed onto this line. That's when I noticed it again. The boundary marker near the corner post. I went inside and grabbed my survey map. I spread it across the hood of my truck under the porch light. The barn sat exactly where I remembered. Right along the original parcel line. The subdivision's boundary curved around it later. This land wasn't always theirs to regulate, I said to myself. I traced the rear line again. Utility easement. Access corridor. Runs directly behind structure. I leaned closer. Exclusive access for maintenance and service, I read aloud. What does that actually mean? I asked the empty driveway. The easement line ran straight behind the barn doors. Straight through the area they just blocked. A thought formed slowly. What if the barn isn't the issue? What if what's behind it is? I stood there in the quiet, staring at the map. They didn't check this, I whispered. Or maybe they did. Either way, they chained something they don't fully understand. I folded the map carefully. I looked at the lock one more time. You wanted escalation, I said softly. I walked back inside without touching the chain. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I was thinking. And that was far more dangerous for them. I sat across from Thomas Caldwell in his small office downtown, my deed and survey map spread across his desk. I need you to tell me if I'm crazy, I said. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the paperwork. Start from the beginning. My HOA fined me $500 per day over my barn door, I said. Then they chained it shut. They physically chained your structure?
Yes.
Without a court order?
Yes. He nodded once. Go on.
They're threatening a lien. They sent a patrol car. They claim it's a compliance issue. And you believe it's more than that, he said. I think they crossed a line.
He picked up the deed first.
When did you purchase this parcel? 10 years ago.
And the barn? Already there.
Reinforced it 5 years back with permits. He flipped through the stamped documents.
I see that. He moved to the survey map.
Did the HOA ever formally annex your original parcel? He asked.
I don't think so, I said.
The subdivision expanded around me. He leaned back in his chair slowly.
Interesting.
Interesting good or interesting bad?
I asked. For them, he said.
Potentially catastrophic.
I leaned forward. Explain.
He tapped the survey with his pen. Your parcel predates the current HOA boundary revisions.
So
if they never properly annex this section under updated covenants, their enforcement authority may be limited.
Limited how?
They can enforce common rules, he said. But structural interference is another matter. They claim visual noncompliance. That's cosmetic, he replied. Chains are not cosmetic. I crossed my arms. They're acting like they own the land.
They don't, he said calmly. You do.
He traced a line behind the barn on the map. This is what interests me.
The easement. Yes.
It says utility access. It says more than that, he corrected. It grants exclusive maintenance access to the property owner for the designated corridor.
That's me, I said.
That's you. So what does that actually mean? It means any obstruction of that corridor interferes with regulated infrastructure.
Infrastructure. He nodded.
Do you know what runs through this utility corridor?
I assumed lines.
Main power distribution, he said.
I blinked.
The neighborhood's power?
Yes. I sat back.
You're serious?
Very.
And the only physical access point is through your rear boundary, he finished, which sits directly behind the barn. I felt something click into place. So when they chained the barn, they obstructed the primary maintenance access.
Is that illegal?
It can be, he said carefully. Especially if done without coordination with the utility provider. They didn't coordinate anything. Did they notify you in writing before physically interfering?
No.
Did they seek court authorization?
No. He folded his hands.
Then they may have exceeded their authority. I looked at the lock in my mind. So the lock?
I asked.
He smiled slightly. That could be their biggest mistake. I felt my pulse steady for the first time in weeks. They think this is about a door, I said quietly. They think it's about aesthetics, he replied. You know it's about access. What happens if the utility company finds out? They would investigate obstruction, he said. And fines at that level make HOA penalties look small.
How small?
Think 5 digits.
Maybe more.
I let out a slow breath. They've been pushing hard.
Good, he said. Good.
The harder they push, the clearer their overreach becomes. So what do? We don't react emotionally, he said.
We document. We notify.
We let them keep making procedural errors. You want them to keep pushing?
I want them confident, he said.
That sounds risky. It's strategic.
I studied him.
You've handled HOA disputes before.
Yes. And?
Power-driven boards tend to overstep when challenged. That sounds like Denise. He raised an eyebrow. Is she the president?
Yes.
Does she operate by consensus?
No. Then she will double down, he said. She already has. Good.
I laughed softly. You really enjoy this, don't you? I enjoy legal clarity, he said. And this is very clear. So I shouldn't cut the chain.
Absolutely not.
I shouldn't confront her again?
Not yet.
What should I do? Send a formal notice demanding immediate removal of the obstruction due to interference with regulated utility access. And if she ignores it? Then we notify the county utilities office. Directly.
Yes.
Won't that escalate things?
He looked at me steadily.
They already escalated.
He wasn't wrong.
If this blows up, I said, it blows up publicly.
Most likely.
Neighbors will find out. They already suspect something. I nodded slowly. So I just wait?
I asked.
You prepare, he said. You let them believe they're in control. I thought about the meeting.
About Denise's smile.
She told me to sue them.
He smiled again.
Be careful what you wish for works both ways. I stood up and gathered my papers.
You look calmer, he observed. I feel calmer. Good.
You really think this could be catastrophic for them? If the easement is as clear as it appears, he said, tapping the map, yes.
And for me?
You're standing on solid ground. I walked to the door, then turned back. One more thing, I said. Why didn't they check this?
He shrugged.
Some boards assume authority before verifying it. And that assumption is expensive. I stepped outside into the afternoon sun feeling different. Not angry.
Not embarrassed.
Strategic. I wasn't going to argue about a barn door anymore. I was going to let them keep pushing. And when the time was right, I was going to show them exactly what they'd chained shut. I came home to the sound of a drill. At first, I thought it was coming from a neighbor's house. Then I saw a white work truck parked in my driveway.
What the hell? I muttered.
2 men were standing on ladders beside my barn. One was prying off the wooden trim around the doorframe. Hey! I shouted, walking fast toward them. What are you doing? The man on the ladder looked down at me. HOA compliance order.
Get down, I said. Now.
He climbed down slowly. We're just following instructions. Who authorized this?
I demanded. Our supervisor, he said.
Said we're modifying the exterior to meet community guidelines. You're altering my structure, I said. Sir, we were told this was approved.
By who? I asked. HOA board. I pulled out my phone.
Step away from the barn.
They hesitated. I'm serious, I said. Step away. They backed up.
I dialed Denise immediately. She answered calmly.
Yes.
You sent contractors to my house, I said. We authorized corrective modification, she replied. You're altering my structure.
It's within HOA rights. No, it isn't.
You refused voluntary compliance. That doesn't give you authority to tear pieces off my barn. It's cosmetic correction.
It's trespassing. It's enforcement.
You're physically changing my property without consent. You're in violation. That's not how property law works.
She sighed.
You're being dramatic. I have contractors standing in my driveway right now.
Yes. Call them off. No.
If they damage something, you're liable. We're protected under covenant authority.
You're wrong. Then challenge it, she said.
You really want to escalate this?
You forced escalation, she snapped. I lowered my voice.
You're making a legal mistake. You've been saying that for weeks.
Because you are. She paused.
The work will continue. If they touch that barn again, I file immediately. Do what you need to do.
She hung up.
I turned to the contractors. You need to leave.
Sir, now.
They exchanged a look. If you don't leave, I call the police for trespassing. They gathered their tools quickly. As they drove off, I took pictures of everything.
The removed trim. The ladder marks. The truck plate. Then I called Caldwell.
They sent contractors, I said as soon as he picked up.
To do what?
Modify my barn. Did you authorize it?
No.
Did they provide a court order?
No. He didn't hesitate.
I'm drafting a cease and desist immediately. They already removed trim.
Document it. I did. Good. What else? I asked.
I'm also notifying the county utilities office.
Already? Yes. Why now?
Because physical interference near a regulated corridor raises flags. They're not touching the back area.
They don't have to, he said.
Their pattern shows disregard for boundaries. I leaned against my truck. This is spiraling.
It's clarifying, he corrected.
So what happens next? We send formal notice demanding restoration and immediate halt of all alterations. And if they ignore it? Then their liability grows.
I looked at the barn.
She's getting reckless. That's what overconfidence does, he said. Later that week, the HOA meeting was standing room only. I walked in with a folder under my arm. Denise sat at the front table, composed as ever. When open comments began, I stood. You authorized contractors to alter my property without consent, I said. We executed corrective measures, she replied. You removed structural trim.
Non-compliant trim, she corrected.
Under what legal authority? Covenant enforcement. I placed copies of my easement file on the table.
This applies, I said.
She glanced at it and laughed lightly. You think old paperwork scares us?
I looked directly at her. It should.
Mark shifted in his chair. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm stating that my property includes a regulated utility easement with exclusive access.
Denise waved a hand. Irrelevant.
It's directly behind the structure you chained and altered. Linda finally spoke. Denise, did we verify easement boundaries before authorizing contractors? Denise didn't look at her. We're discussing aesthetic compliance. We're discussing legal exposure, I said.
You are not the board, she snapped. No, I replied.
I'm the landowner. Murmurs filled the room.
Mark leaned toward Denise.
Maybe we should review this privately.
She shook her head. No. We vote tonight.
Vote on what?
I asked.
Authorization to pursue legal action against you for continued defiance.
The room went quiet.
You're suing me?
I asked. If necessary, she said.
For protecting my own property? For violating community standards. I let a slow breath out. Before you vote, I said, understand that contractors have already trespassed.
They were authorized, she replied.
By a board that may not have annex authority over my original parcel. Linda looked at her papers again. Denise, she said softly, did we ever complete formal annexation on his lot?
Denise's jaw tightened.
That's irrelevant.
It's not, I said.
She banged the gavel lightly.
Enough.
I picked up my folder but didn't open it further. I had more documents.
More proof.
But I didn't reveal it.
Not yet. Proceed with your vote, I said calmly. Denise stared at me. You seem confident. I am, I replied.
Mark looked uneasy.
Linda avoided eye contact again.
Denise raised her hand. All in favor of authorizing litigation? 2 hands went up immediately.
Linda hesitated. Linda. Denise pressed.
After a long pause, Linda raised her hand halfway.
The motion passed. Denise looked at me.
You forced this. I shook my head slightly.
No. You did. The room felt heavy.
Neighbors whispered. Carl caught my eye from the back. I said nothing more. I gathered my papers and walked out slowly. Behind me I heard Denise say, "We will not be intimidated." I almost smiled. They thought this was intimidation. They had no idea what was coming next. And I wasn't done holding back. The county trucks showed up on a Tuesday morning. I was standing in my driveway when I saw 2 white vehicles with utility seals turn the corner and slow in front of my house. Well, I said quietly, that didn't take long.
2 officials stepped out. One carried a clipboard.
The other looked straight at the barn. Are you the property owner? The first one asked me.
Yes, I said.
He nodded toward the back boundary. Who authorized obstruction of this access route? I kept my voice steady. That would be the HOA.
Specifically, he asked. Denise Harper, I said.
By then, Denise was already walking quickly across the street from the clubhouse parking lot. She must have seen the trucks.
What's going on? She called out. The official turned to her.
Are you HOA president? Yes, she said, forcing a smile. Is there a problem? He gestured toward the barn. Who authorized obstruction of this access route?
She blinked.
What access route?
I stepped forward.
The regulated utility easement that runs behind my barn, I said. Silence hit the driveway like a dropped weight.
Denise looked at me.
That's irrelevant too, the official cut her off. It's not irrelevant. He walked toward the rear of the barn, studying the chain. This corridor houses the primary neighborhood power distribution line, he said. Maintenance access must remain clear. Denise's smile faded. We were addressing a covenant violation. You chained the structure, I said calmly. And altered it. She turned to me. We secured a non-compliant exterior. The second official spoke. This access point appears to be the only service entry for this section. That's correct, I said. Denise's voice tightened. No one informed us of that. You never asked, I replied. Mark came jogging from the clubhouse, slightly out of breath. What's happening? He asked. The official faced him. Did your board authorize physical obstruction of this access? We were correcting a violation, Mark said. Answer the question, the official replied. Yes, Mark admitted. The official wrote something down. Do you understand, he said slowly, that interference with regulated infrastructure access can trigger county penalties? Denise lifted her chin. This is a private HOA matter.
No, he said firmly. This is not.
Neighbors began gathering along the sidewalk. Carl stood with his arms crossed, watching closely. I kept my tone even. You locked it, I said to Denise. Without verifying what ran behind it. We had authority, she insisted. Over aesthetics, I replied. Not utilities. The official pointed at the chain. Who installed this? Our contractors, Denise said. With written coordination from the utility provider, he asked.
She hesitated. No. With county notification? No.
He underlined something on his clipboard.
Mark swallowed hard.
We didn't know there was a main line back there.
I looked at him.
You never asked. Linda stepped into the driveway quietly. Denise, she said under her breath, did we review the easement file?
Denise ignored her.
The official continued. The distribution line serves every home in this subdivision. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. If access is obstructed during an outage, he added, response time increases. Denise's face had gone pale. This is being exaggerated, she said. It is not, the official replied. You altered and secured a structure tied directly to regulated access.
It's his barn, she said. It's the access point, he corrected.
I folded my arms. I provided copies of the easement weeks ago.
Mark looked at me.
You didn't say it controlled the power.
I didn't need to, I said.
The documents did. The second official examined the removed trim on the ground. You authorized modifications as well? He asked. Yes, Denise said quietly. Without structural review. It was cosmetic. Cosmetic work near a regulated corridor still requires due diligence, he replied. The crowd grew thicker. Someone whispered, is our power at risk? The official heard it. The line is intact, he said loudly. But obstruction is a violation. Denise tried to recover. We were enforcing community standards. And in doing so, he said, you may have violated county code. Mark ran a hand over his face. What kind of violation? The official looked up from his clipboard. Potential interference with critical infrastructure, he said. Subject to fines.
How much? Mark asked.
Depending on duration and severity, he said, fines can exceed $50,000. The crowd gasped. Denise's composure cracked. That's absurd, she said. It's documented, he replied. She looked at me. You did this. I warned you, I said calmly. You trapped us. I showed you paperwork, I answered. You laughed. Carl spoke up from the sidewalk. We all saw that. Linda finally stepped closer. Denise, she said softly, we should remove the chain immediately.
The official nodded. Yes. Now. Denise hesitated.
Remove it, the official repeated. Mark rushed forward and fumbled with the lock. His hands shook. When the chain fell to the ground, it echoed louder than it should have. The official made another note. You will receive formal notice, he said. I suggest your board consult counsel immediately. Denise opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since this started, she looked unsure. This isn't over, she muttered. I met her eyes. No, I said evenly. It's just getting clear. The officials returned to their trucks after taking photographs. Neighbors stayed behind. Carl walked up to me. You knew about that line? I knew about the easement, I said. And you let them keep pushing? I let them make their choice. Linda looked at me carefully. Why didn't you say something stronger earlier?
I did, I said.
You just didn't want to hear it. Denise stood a few feet away, silent. Mark avoided everyone's eyes. Whispers filled the air.
50,000? Over a barn?
Can they even do that? I didn't add anything more. I didn't need to. Denise's authority was cracking right there in my driveway. And for the first time, the neighborhood wasn't looking at me like the problem. They were looking at her. The emergency meeting notice hit every mailbox the morning after the county trucks left. Mandatory attendance recommended, it read. I knew what that meant. That night, the clubhouse was packed wall to wall. People stood along the back and lined the side walls.
The air felt tight.
Denise sat at the front table, jaw set, gavel in hand. "We are calling this emergency session to address misinformation circulating in the neighborhood," she began. Murmurs rolled through the room.
She looked directly at me. "He misled us," she said.
I stayed seated for a moment, letting that hang there. Mark avoided my eyes. Linda stared at the papers in front of her. Denise continued, "The board acted in good faith based on incomplete representations."
I stood up slowly.
"I provided documents weeks ago," I said. "You provided selective paperwork," she shot back. "I gave you the full easement file. You never explicitly stated it controlled the neighborhood power line."
"I didn't need to," I replied.
"The document states regulated utility corridor." Voices started whispering louder. Carl stood up near the back. "You called the police on him over a barn." Denise pointed her gavel toward him. "That was a safety concern."
"It wasn't," I said calmly.
"The officer said it was civil." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Let's keep this orderly."
I looked at Denise.
"You chained regulated infrastructure." Gasps filled the room.
Denise's face flushed.
"That is an exaggeration." The door at the side of the room opened. Thomas Caldwell walked in, briefcase in hand. "I'm here at my client's request," he said evenly.
Denise frowned.
"This is a private HOA meeting." "Yes," Caldwell replied. "And your actions created public regulatory exposure." He set his briefcase on the table. "Who allowed him in?"
Denise demanded. "I did," I said.
Linda finally lifted her head. "Denise," she said quietly, "did we verify annexation records before enforcing the revised covenant?" Denise snapped, "Stay in line."
The room went still.
Linda didn't back down. "I'm asking a procedural question," she said. "You're undermining this board," Denise replied. "I'm protecting it," Linda answered. Several neighbors nodded. Caldwell opened a folder. "Let's be clear," he said. "The parcel in question predates the current annexation map." Denise waved her hand. "That's irrelevant." "It is not," Caldwell said firmly. "If annexation was incomplete, enforcement authority may be limited." Mark's face went pale. "Limited how?" "Limited to common standards," Caldwell replied. "Not structural interference." Carl called out, "So the chain was illegal?" Caldwell looked at him. "That depends on how you define trespass and obstruction." Denise slammed the gavel. "Enough theatrics." I stepped forward. "This isn't theatrics," I said. "You escalated over a door." "You refused compliance," she replied. "You escalated to contractors.
To police. To physical obstruction. We followed protocol." "Show it," I said. She hesitated. "Show the vote authorizing contractors to modify private property," I continued. Mark swallowed. "We discussed it informally." "In a quorum?" Caldwell asked. Silence. Linda's voice was steady now. "Denise, did we ever record that decision?" Denise glared at her. "You were present." "I don't recall a formal vote," Linda said. The room buzzed. Caldwell spoke again. "If actions were taken without recorded board approval, personal liability becomes relevant." "Personal?" Mark asked, almost whispering. "Yes," Caldwell said. "Directors can be individually named in civil actions." Mark looked like he might sit down and disappear. Denise tried to recover. "This is intimidation," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "This is consequence." She pointed at me. "You orchestrated this." "I warned you," I said. "You withheld context." "I provided documents." "You didn't highlight the power line." "You never asked what ran through the corridor," I answered. Carl crossed his arms. "Why didn't you check?" Denise snapped, "Because it wasn't relevant." Linda looked at her directly. It was. The shift in the room was obvious now. People weren't whispering about me anymore. They were staring at her. Mark leaned toward Denise and whispered something I couldn't hear. She shook her head sharply. Caldwell closed his folder. "Let's discuss exposure," he said calmly. "County fines may exceed $50,000. Legal defense costs could double that." A woman near the front gasped. "Are our dues going up?" "That depends," Caldwell replied, "on how this is resolved." Denise stood abruptly. "This board will not be threatened by one homeowner."
I'm not threatening you, I said. I'm asking for accountability.
You forced this, she insisted. No, Linda said quietly. We did. Denise turned on her. Excuse me. We pushed too far, Linda continued.
We didn't verify boundaries. We didn't document decisions. Mark nodded weakly. Maybe we should consult outside counsel.
Denise stared at both of them. You're folding, she demanded.
We're exposed, Mark replied.
The word hung there. Exposed. Carl spoke again.
All this over a barn door? It was never about the door, I said. Denise grabbed her papers.
This meeting is adjourned, she snapped.
She stormed out through the side door without another word. The room stayed silent for a second after she left. Then the murmurs began again, louder this time.
Linda looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. For what? I asked.
For not pushing back sooner.
I nodded once.
You are now. Mark avoided my eyes completely. Caldwell leaned toward me and spoke quietly. You handled that well.
I didn't raise my voice, I said.
You didn't need to. As people began filing out, several neighbors stopped near me.
Why didn't you just pay the fine? Someone asked.
Because it wasn't right, I said.
Carl clapped my shoulder. You stayed calm. I had to, I replied.
When I finally stepped outside into the night air, I felt something settle inside me. For weeks, I'd been reacting. Now I was leading. The power dynamic had flipped. And everyone in that room knew it. The county's formal warning arrived 3 days after the emergency meeting. I read it twice at my kitchen table. Notice of regulatory violation, I said quietly. It outlined obstruction of a utility corridor and unauthorized structural interference. By noon, the entire neighborhood had heard about it. That evening, I got a knock at my door. Linda stood there holding a folder.
Can I come in? She asked. Sure, I said.
She stepped inside slowly. The HOA's insurance carrier responded, she said.
And? I asked.
They're refusing coverage.
For what?
For regulatory violations, she replied. They said obstruction of infrastructure access isn't covered under standard HOA liability. So the board pays personally?
I asked. Potentially, she said. I nodded once.
That's serious.
It is, she said quietly.
Denise didn't expect that. What does she expect now? She's calling a special board session tonight. For damage control?
For survival, Linda said. I leaned against the counter.
You don't have to defend her.
I'm not, she replied.
I'm trying to fix this. Then start with transparency, I said.
She swallowed. I will.
Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was a community-wide email. Effective immediately, Denise Harper resigns as HOA president. I stared at the screen for a long moment. A second message followed. Mark Benson resigns from the board. I exhaled slowly.
Carl called me. You see that? He asked. Yeah.
Didn't think she'd fold.
She didn't fold, I said.
She ran out of leverage. He laughed quietly. Same difference. The next day, Linda requested a meeting at the clubhouse.
I went.
She stood at the front of the room alone. I owe everyone an apology, she began.
The room was quiet.
We failed to verify annexation records, she continued. We authorized contractors without formal vote. We escalated without due diligence. She looked at me directly. And I'm sorry for not pushing back sooner.
I nodded once.
Carl spoke from the back. Are the fines against him gone?
Yes, Linda said.
All violation notices are withdrawn.
And the legal fees? Someone asked.
The HOA will cover them, she replied.
I spoke up.
I didn't want this to cost the community.
It already did, she said.
We're absorbing it. After the meeting, I walked back to my barn. The chain still hung loosely where it had been unlocked. I picked it up slowly. This ends now, I said quietly. I unthreaded it from the handles and let it drop to the ground. The door swung open freely again. I stood there for a second, feeling the air move through the space. Later that afternoon, a familiar patrol car pulled into my driveway. Officer Ruiz stepped out. Everything calm today? He asked.
Much calmer, I said. He looked. At the barn. Chains gone.
Yeah. Looks like this worked out, he said.
Not by accident, I replied.
He smiled slightly. Heard about the county notice. Word travels fast.
It does. He shifted his weight.
You handled this better than most people would. I wanted it resolved, not explosive, I said. Still, he added, you could have escalated further. I considered it.
And
I decided against it.
he nodded.
Sometimes restraint is power. That's what I'm learning. He glanced toward the street. Neighborhood seems quieter.
It is. Good, he said.
That's how it should be. After he left, I got a call from Caldwell.
The board's counsel reached out, he said. And
they're agreeing to cover your legal fees in full.
no contest. No.
And the county fine? Reduced due to corrective action and leadership change. I exhaled slowly. So this ends here?
It can, he said.
You sound like there's an option. There's always an option to pursue damages, he replied.
Trespass. Harassment. I know.
Do you want to? I looked out at the barn.
No, I said. Why not?
Because I don't need more.
You're certain? Yes.
You'd likely win. I already did.
He paused. Fair enough, he said.
Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. After we hung up, Carl walked over again. You going to sue them? He asked.
No. Why?
Because the point was never revenge.
He frowned.
Looked like revenge from where I stood.
It wasn't, I said. It was correction.
He nodded slowly. Feels different now.
It is.
What happens next?
We rebuild trust, I said. That'll take time.
I've got time. Over the next week, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted. No more certified letters. No more red notices.
Just quiet.
One afternoon, Linda stopped by again. We're revising enforcement procedures, she said.
Good.
We're adding annexation verification and legal review before structural action.
That's smart. She hesitated.
I want you on the advisory committee. I raised an eyebrow. You're serious?
Yes.
After everything?
Because of everything, she said. I thought about it.
I'll consider it, I replied. That night, I stood by my barn again. The wood looked the same as it always had. The door moved easily. I ran my hand along the frame. They had tried to make an example of me. Instead, they made one of themselves.
I could have pushed harder.
I could have demanded more. But sometimes karma is enough. And sometimes control isn't about crushing someone. It's about standing your ground until they understand where the boundary really is. Months passed before the neighborhood felt steady again. The new board posted meeting minutes online. They announced votes in advance. They invited questions. One evening, Carl leaned against my fence and whistled at my barn. Guess that door's the most powerful thing in this neighborhood, he said.
I laughed. It's just a door. No, he replied, grinning. It's a symbol.
Of what? Of you not folding.
I shrugged.
I almost did.
He blinked.
You?
Yeah. When?
The week they find me, I said. I thought about sealing it up.
Paying quietly.
And letting them win?
I wouldn't have called it that, I said. I would have called it peace.
He folded his arms. Would they have stopped? I didn't answer immediately.
No, I finally said.
That's what I figured, he replied. They would have moved on to the next thing, I added.
Another fence. Another mailbox. Another person.
Carl nodded slowly. Authority only works when nobody checks it. Exactly, I said. A few days later, I attended a board meeting by choice, not obligation. Linda sat at the head of the table. We're proposing a rule, she said, looking at me briefly, that any structural enforcement requires county verification first.
Good, I said.
And open comment before action, she added. That's better, I replied. Mark's old chair remained empty. No one rushed decisions anymore. After the meeting, a neighbor I barely knew approached me. I wanted to thank you, she said.
For what?
For standing up, she replied. I didn't realize how aggressive things had gotten until everything exploded. It shouldn't have had to explode, I said. But it did, she said gently. And now it won't again. I walked back home under clear skies. My barn door stood open, sunlight catching the grain of the wood. I ran my hand along the frame again. I remembered the day I almost locked it permanently. I remembered the weight of the fine letter in my hand. I remembered thinking, just pay it.
Just make it stop. Hey, Carl called from across the street. Door still open?
Always, I called back.
He crossed over.
You ever think about what would have happened if you'd backed down? He asked.
Yeah, I said. All the time. And?
I think they would have learned the wrong lesson.
Which is?
That pressure works, I said. That intimidation pays.
He nodded once.
Instead they learned something else. They learned I read documents, I said lightly.
He laughed.
You did more than read.
I checked them, I replied. I verified.
I asked questions. That's what scared them, he said.
Good, I answered. He studied the barn.
You feel like you won?
I thought about that.
I feel like balance came back, I said. That's not the same thing.
It is to me.
Later that month, the county inspector stopped by for routine maintenance access. I appreciate the cooperation, he said as he stepped through the open door. It was always available, I replied.
I know, he said.
Just easier now. After he left, Linda called me. We finalized the governance revisions, she said. Congratulations. I meant what I said before, she added. About the advisory role. You still want me?
Yes. Why? I asked.
Because you don't overreact, she said.
You respond.
I reacted plenty, I replied. You stayed controlled, she corrected. I considered that. I don't want power, I said. I'm not offering power, she answered. I'm offering accountability.
That's different. Yes, she said. It is.
I agreed to attend quarterly reviews.
Not to dominate.
Just to watch.
Weeks turned into months.
No more emergency meetings.
No more threats.
Just agendas and votes and discussion. One afternoon, I stood by my barn again. The sunlight hit the wood at an angle that made the grain glow. I remembered how small I'd felt when the police first knocked on my door. I remembered how angry I'd been when contractors pried at the trim. I remembered how close I'd come to surrendering just to avoid the stress.
Worth it?
Carl asked from behind me. Yeah, I said without turning. Even with the headaches? Especially because of them, I replied. He stepped beside me.
You look different, he said. How? Calmer. I am, I said. Why?
Because I know something now. What's that? That control isn't about forcing other people, I said. It's about knowing exactly where I stand.
And you're sure? I am.
He nodded toward the open door.
They know too. That's the point, I said. I didn't feel.
First knocked on my door. I remembered how angry I'd been when contractors pried at the trim. I remembered how close I'd come to surrendering just to avoid the stress.
Worth it?
Carl asked from behind me. Yeah, I said without turning. Even with the headaches? Especially because of them, I replied. He stepped beside me.
You look different, he said. How? Calmer. I am, I said. Why?
Because I know something now. What's that? That control isn't about forcing other people, I said. It's about knowing exactly where I stand.
And you're sure? I am.
He nodded toward the open door.
They know too. That's the point, I said. I didn't feel.